Good morning and welcome back to Engadget's continuing live coverage of CES 2021. I am Senior Mobile Editor Chris Velasco. Really quickly want to take a note to mention apologies for the audio issues we had during our LG conversation. Thanks to everyone in the chat who pointed it out. I would like to blame Skype for that, but that was probably my mistake. Anyway, LG is done. Now the Samsung press conference is done. And joining me to discuss what Samsung has just announced and re-announced in some cases is reviews editor Sherlyn Lowe. Sherlyn, welcome back.
Thank you. Hi. That was fun.
That was fun. There was a lot of fun stuff in Samsung's press conferences, and this year was no different. Really quickly, just off the top, what stood out for you in this press conference?
I think the AI JetBot surprisingly stood out for me. I was also taken sort of by surprise that there was no mention of TVs at all. Samsung has already pre-announced most of its TV news January 6th, I believe. So that was last week. But I thought they would at least kind of bring it up, show us some of that. I must have missed it if it had happened. But then there were dogs and cats. So that was fun. But you saw the JetBot in person, V. Can you tell us more about it?
Sure can, but really quickly, I do want to know, Samsung did sort of name check at least their micro OLED TV, the one based on the wall, which we saw at CES last year. So they did sort of briefly run through some of their TV innovations, but for the most part, this was a very different press conference than LG. LG purely product focused. With this press conference, Samsung decided to take a bit of a step back and talk about its larger role as an electronics provider in a world that is rapidly changing. So yes, to your point about JetBot, though, one of many robots Samsung showed off this morning during its CES press conference. I got to tell you, I'm not a robot vacuum person. I find a lot of joy personally in just like puttering around my apartment and making sure it's clean. Doesn't happen often enough, but I do enjoy doing it. What's nice about the JetBot, as Samsung pointed out, is the multitude of sensors and the kind of intelligence behind all of it. So it has a LiDAR for sort of wide range room sensing. It's got a trio of sensors up front and cameras as well. All of these things work in tandem, not only to help the JetBot 90 kind of figure out the best path to clean your apartment, but also to figure out how to tackle some of the stuff in front of it. So if it sees a phone cord or a sock, as they say, it'll see that and decide, you know what, I'm not going to destroy either of those things. I'm just going to swerve around it. If it sees smaller debris on the ground, for example, something small and round that could look like cereal or dog food, it'll decide to plow right through and just clean up the mess. I will say, when we were talking with Samsung prior to today's press conference about the JetBot 90, they did specifically say that it can identify a dog poo and avoid the dog poo. So you don't get a repeat of that terrifying YouTube video of a Roomba dragging a poop all over the floor. So there is at least that.
I mean, I was enjoying this kind of faux Western that they had going on with the dog versus the cat. The JetBot AI was certainly interesting. For me, I am like you. I enjoy getting into the corners myself with a mop or even a cloth sometimes and just cleaning it. But this JetBot does look like it's a lot smarter than some that are out there. I will say there was another robot that Samsung unveiled, the Bot Handy, and I was paying attention to our live chat while Samsung's keynote was going on, and everybody kind of had ideas for what this extra hand at home could do for you. But for the purposes that Samsung says it's for, V, what do you think? Does this seem like it would be helpful or it would just get in the way?
It's tough to say. It really kind of depends on your circumstances. I live alone, so sometimes I feel like an extra hand might be helpful. Before we get any further, though, yes, let's just get this out of the way. This thing is called the Bot Handy. Nice. Way to go, Samsung. Please work on that. That needs to be addressed. But anyway, really just terrible branding aside, this does seem, if not exactly practical, a step in the direction of practicality. In case you missed the Bot Handy spot in the press conference, it is a robot that basically has a tall cylindrical body with a face, like it'll make cool faces at you apparently, and a robot arm. But what's really more important than the arm itself is, again, the intelligence behind the arm. It uses sensors and AI to determine not just what object it's being asked to hold, but the material of said object. So it'll handle, say, a rubber ball much differently than it would handle, in this case, a glass or a ceramic plate. In those cases, obviously, you have to worry about pressure and sort of balance much more than you would with a ball. So, it remains to be seen exactly how well that recognition and that sort of interpretation of the visual data works. We have not seen Bot Handy. I can't with this name. We've not seen Bot Handy outside of a very canned demo in this video. So who knows? But it's cute in the way that a lot of Samsung's robots tend to be. They also announced the other one, as you saw, the Bot Care, which is sort of a sequel to the version of the Bot Care that we saw in 2019 that functions quite a bit differently. Sherlyn, what can you tell us about Mr. Bot Care?
I'm not actually entirely up to speed on Bot Care, and I'm still a little bit focused on Bot Handy, to be honest, because
okay.
I, like you, live alone, and I'm like, do I need another? I like doing household chores myself because I'm very particular about some of these things. That the way I would do some of these things, like load the dishwasher, for example, and I don't know that I would trust a robot to do that, even though it might do it better than I do. I would say that, like, people in the chat, I just want to shout out that we're going to try our best to pay attention to the chat. This is live. We are going to interact with you directly, but we might not be able to constantly be answering your questions. But I will say that there's people are already excited at the idea of the JetBot being able to circumvent or go around dog poop, and they would buy their own dog poop scoopers. The Bot Care device, though. V, why don't you tell me a bit more about it? Because I got so caught up with Bot Handy when Samsung was explaining it that I was like, that must have just glazed right through.
Look, totally fair. Bot Handy has charming in quite a few ways. Bot Care takes things in a slightly different direction. They originally sort of pegged it 2 years ago as just like this little home robot that putters around and makes cool faces at you, and probably some other things. I'm underselling it here. But this time, Samsung is positioning Bot Care as a robot that has a pretty intimate understanding of your schedule, what it is you need to do, and sort of uses AI to remind you of things that might be coming up, but also to check in with you as a person. As we saw in the press conference stream, Bot Care sort of rolled up to a person and said, "Hey, you've been on the computer for a while. You should probably get up," which is that's a reminder that I could personally benefit from very frequently. So in that way, Bot Care seems not to tend to household chores the way a Bot Handy might, but instead tries to tend to a person's life and sort of mental state, which does sound kind of nice. It is also usable for conference calls, as we saw in the press conference. It'll remind you of something like a conference call coming up in your schedule, and when that conference call does come up, its face just like turns into a tablet, and you can see the other person and talk to them via a camera. So if that all works the way it is intended to, very cool stuff. But again, we have not seen Samsung really provide like a proper viable roadmap for getting these things into homes just yet.
I want to say that, and I remember seeing the Bot Care now that I've got over the shock of Bot Handy. But a lot of the things that you just mentioned, right, reminding you to kind of get up when you've been idle for a little bit too long at your computer, or reminding you that an upcoming appointment is 5 minutes away. Those sound like things that a smartwatch could do. So really, I feel like the main benefit here is to have the roving conference call screen, which there are existing telepresence robots that already do something like that. And there's the adoption of those still isn't very high. My take, at least, is that a lot of these devices that we see, or these robots that Samsung has talked about today, will make more sense in specific environments. Like Bot Handy might be more useful, say, in a hospital next to a patient's bedside, where maybe they do need an extra hand getting something that's far away or out of their reach. Or Bot Care might be able to keep people connected in those, patient care environments. I don't know that it's so good for the home use just yet, but there are compelling use cases, I think, for some of these robots.
That's definitely true. And it's, I think, perhaps to Samsung's detriment that it only ever really talks about these robots within the context of a home. Because as you point out, Bot Handy in hospitals would be a great thing. I could totally see something like a Bot Care being used in sort of a retirement facility or something, just to have, one machine that can sort of stroll up to you and say, hey, you've got that scheduled call with your granddaughter in 10 minutes. Let me turn my face into a screen so you can talk to her in a little bit. So these are use cases that have not been really openly discussed by Samsung, at least not within the context of its CES 2021 press conference, which is frankly a shame because, as you point out, there's a lot of potential for these robots to do actual good. The fact that they sort of are cutesy and have the ability to salute you and stuff, like that added bit of personality also really helps, especially within certain contexts like retirement facilities and hospitals, like having something that, in addition to being practical and functional, that is also kind of cute and fun. Like that's got to be good for the spirit as well. But
I mean, hopefully it doesn't annoy the people it's supposed to be tending to. I mean, my grandmother is currently in a long-term care facility just getting over surgery, and I can see this robot being helpful for me, but I don't know how she would take to it just yet. There is a lot we need to know about the implementation here. I don't think we can speculate too much on it. But Samsung did announce a few more things, and I actually managed to get some hands-on time with one of them, the Samsung Health Smart Trainer. And I'm going kind of in grouping together all the AI-based things because, Samsung did make a big section about its AI stuff. But the Smart Health, Smart Trainer, even though it wasn't part of the AI package, is sort of using AI. So Samsung Health first launched on Samsung's TVs last year, and this year the company is introducing this Smart Trainer feature, which uses an optional third-party camera to kind of look at you and see how many jumping jacks you're doing, count them for you, and it'll also assess your form. So if you're not really holding your plank right, or if you're not squatting properly, then it won't count those into your number of reps required to finish an exercise. Smart Trainer is going to be available with about 24 different workout videos at launch from partners like Jillian Michaels, OB Fitness, Bar3. So it's kind of limited for now. And based on the presentation, that very described by our team, Engadget team, as kind of Black Mirror-like, sort of a trailer. I'm not sure how useful it'll be just yet because a lot of the actions the company showed were jumping jacks, squats, and burpees. I don't know how much more beyond that the company has worked on. The ones that I tried, the exercises I tried out in particular, were jumping jacks and squats. And yeah, it was effective for those, but I'd love to see how this can become a more comprehensive package overall, because I do think that exercise form is very important, especially as we move to at-home fitness during the pandemic and beyond. But V, is this something that intrigues you at all?
Look, it is, and you and I have spoken a lot about sort of home fitness within the context of COVID-19 quite recently. So this is something that's been on my mind. I'm curious though, like I've got like a little stationary bike. I've got like my apps that sort of tell me how to do things, or at least when to do things. But as a person who's tried Samsung's approach to this, which does seem to be a bit more guided, like for me, it depends on how Samsung positions this. If this is something you're supposed to spend $10 a month on, assuming you have a Samsung TV, like maybe not. Maybe not right out of the gate.
Right.
What's your take on immediate sort of viability? Like, would you replace any of your existing workout stuff with something like this?
Because the content is so important and the content is so sparse right now, no. And also remember, you'll have to be the one to attach a camera to your TV. So in the demo that I took, it was a Logitech webcam perched on top of the screen. You can connect any, camera you prefer with USB, but it does require that additional accessory that not everyone might have, and not everyone is comfortable or wants to have a camera watching them while they exercise anyway. So it's entirely up to you, which is nice. But I think it needs to be embedded into more content so far, and then there has to be a bit more of value for the user. And maybe that's, combined with some sort of personal trainer software that makes sure, and in a way that's what the Jillian Michael workout is, but more interactive, I feel, might be the way to go. I'm not a product designer. Samsung needs to think about how to make this more appealing to the user. But Samsung had a lot of announcements, by the way, and we still have about 15 minutes to go before our next thing. So do you want to go over some of the other stuff that we saw from Samsung at the presentation?
Let's definitely do that. I just want to note really quickly, Samsung maybe not great at software functionality and design. Who would have thought? Samsung. I wonder about that. Yeah, they're terrible at it. But yes, to your point, Samsung has announced a bunch of other things. Really quickly, right off the top, we are recapping Samsung's CES 2021 press conference, during which they talked about, very briefly, their micro-LED TV, sort of based on the wall. They talked about their bespoke refrigerator, which is really cool if you're into refrigerators, but generally not a thing we'd really discuss on Engadget. To me, some of the most interesting stuff that Samsung got into is stuff that they saved right for the end. They were talking about their sustainability efforts and sort of upcycling, which is not something I expected kind of going into this, right? Like I expected products everywhere, not ways to sort of improve the life of your devices after they've hit their useful life. The most interesting to me, and Shirley, I'd love to get your take on this, is the upcycling for Galaxy phones. This is really cool. If you have an older Galaxy device, like like a Galaxy S7, a Galaxy Tab, whatever, devices that have sort of outlived their usefulness and are just sort of taking up space in your drawer, instead of letting them continue to sit unused or, worst case scenario, like throwing them in the trash, which you should absolutely not do. Please look into e-waste recycling if you're considering that. Instead of doing any of those things, you can load what Samsung makes sound like new software specifically for those devices to turn them into sort of other Internet of Things devices. So, for example, they use the example of sort of running new software on a phone and turning that into an audio monitor for your child. So yes, you would probably still want like a traditional like baby monitor, maybe one with video because it's 2020. But if you had the extra phone laying around, you could have that sort of in the child's room and have it ping you whenever it can tell your child is crying. That's the big example that they pointed out, and one that I think a lot of parents could benefit from, because who doesn't have old phones laying around somewhere? But I would love to see Samsung kind of expand this, and I can think of like a bajillion different things I could use my old phones for. Shilin, where are you at on upcycling?
Two things, right? The first thing is that you've already said Samsung's not the best when it comes to software and software for products like that. I am curious to see how effective this will be. Another thing that stood out to me of the Galaxy Upcycling program is the mention of the eye exams, that Samsung was able to turn some of these older phones or devices into portable eye exam tools for company or countries or areas where people need it. And I think that that's actually a better use of some of these old devices. I am pretty, I'm a fan of decluttering. I love to be able to donate some of these older devices to a program like that to hopefully see it go to, something good. But I will also say that I am a pretty paranoid person who is antsy about her device, like her information, her data, and I would love to demag something or magnetize something or something like that before I hopefully recycle it in a hopefully like a good way, take it to Best Buy or something like that. But it remains to be seen, right? There's not a lot of details out there yet about this program and how you would contribute to it, how you use it. Again, I would love to know more from Samsung, but I do think it's good that the company actually spent such a huge portion, to me anyway, of its keynote on a topic like sustainability, right? It might sound like just this corporate PR speak where they're trying to make themselves sound good and like, oh, we're doing this good thing for the environment, sure. But it is also an important topic that we do need to pay attention to. And I think that the fact that Samsung spent a certain amount of time on its keynote on such a topic is laudable, even if it makes themselves look good. You know what I mean?
For sure. I want to continue digging into Samsung sustainability, but I do want to make a quick note here. We've got 12 minutes until the end of the session. We'll be moving into a conversation between Devindra Hardawar and Samsung execs to talk about their latest line of TVs. So all of the TV deep dive stuff you're not getting in this panel, you're going to get in just a little bit, just because Samsung is like one of two big press conferences we've had at CES so far. That's why we're talking about Samsung, and that's just how it goes. I do also want to note that we are paying attention to the chat. If you have any questions or comments that you'd like us to address on the stream, we've got about 10 minutes left for that, so drop them in the chat. We're definitely looking at that. But yeah, back to sustainability. The other sort of initiative that Samsung talked about was its sort of eco-friendly packaging, which they started last year apparently, and this is not something I've seen because I've not bought a Samsung TV ever, actually. But apparently if you do, all of its televisions and many of its products in 2021 will use this eco-friendly packaging, which is designed to be sort of reconfigured and reused as sort of small bits of furniture, which I could see that being helpful. I definitely appreciate the thought that went into it. Sherlyn, do you want little bits of cardboard furniture in your house after you buy a TV?
I think there's a better way. I mean, I've received packages like that before where parts of the box are meant for you to reuse in your home, and I just don't have room for more clutter. I live in a tiny studio. I don't have room, and I'm not a person who wants something flimsy like cardboard lying around for a while. I just put them in the recycling bin, and that's how I deal with it. But again, at least there's an option, right? At least I can still go to the recycling bin and put cardboard in the cardboard box. And then if not, if you really don't want to repurpose it, I guess it's a nice touch. A lot of companies in other areas like laptops, for example, are committing to things like using ocean-bound plastic or recyclable materials in their products itself. And I think that might make more of an impact when it comes to sustainability and saving our planet. But this is one way to go, and this isn't Samsung's only way, obviously. So it's nice to see one disclosure. We'd love to see more. But there was one more thing, by the way, just on the AI front that stood out to me, not to jump all over the place, but
go for it.
When Samsung did that neural avatar, right? When it was talking about its AI and it did when its host was, making the same expressions, and then the Mona Lisa appeared next to him, and then there was, these same expressions being made. And the neural avatar reminds me of the LG press conference that just happened, where they had a virtual influencer altogether introduce part of its news. I want to shout out the chat that a lot of people in the chat were saying, plot twist, the host of the Samsung CES keynote himself might have been a deep fake or an AI from the very beginning. Now, there was no such reveal, but that would have been like a great big surprise if that was the case. I don't think we're that near that future just yet, but what do you think of the neural avatar?
The neural avatar is dumb. Like, yeah, you can map your face. Like, that's not difficult stuff. But you raise an interesting point, and the chat raises an interesting point, because last year, did we not see Samsung or an offshoot of Samsung, Neon, sort of talking about these sort of AI-powered avatars? What if that presenter was a Neon AI avatar? That could surely explain some of the weird decisions he made while presenting this incredibly canned presentation. But I digress. I don't think that's what actually happened. I would love so much for that to be the case. Quick note, I am seeing some people asking in the chat, when is Sony? Because those people have their priorities well in order.
Sony is 5 p.m. Eastern today, and we will be live streaming here on Engadget.com as well, and followed by, our Engadget teammates helping you break down some of the news and giving you some color and context behind it, and maybe some additional information, or also just to react to the news alongside you, with you, like we're doing now, hopefully. But shout out also to...
Go ahead.
Go ahead. What are people asking?
No, I was just saying, do they even look at this chat? Yes, we're looking at the chat. It just seems like many of your conversations are happening, and they don't really need us to weigh in on it, frankly.
Well, I mean, speaking of looking at the chat, I want to call out that Zachary63 said that overall, based on this presentation, it seems like Samsung is working for the future rather than the now. I think that's a very, good observation. It feels like a lot of these technologies are either very futuristic, or they're not thinking of people's lives right now, where it seems like a lot of these technologies might be a bit expensive, might be a bit out of reach. And yes, there's something about spectacle and something luxurious that's so, ideal. Like it's like an unattainable thing can sometimes be so great to fantasize about. But it would be nice to see Samsung do something that's more realistic, more practical for the average consumer, right? I mean, the MicroLED that we talked about, that the company announced, and we're going to take a deep dive into in a little bit, that's great technology, but we haven't heard a price, and we're going to guess it's like upwards, like tens of thousands of dollars, if not more. And that's not what, people like you or I are going to buy, not to mention the scores of other people watching this stream right now, right? I mean, what do you think? Is Samsung working for the future or the now?
Samsung always has an eye towards the future, and I appreciate about them. But I do wish, to your point, that they did kind of focus more on the now. And this is something I brought up during our sort of discussion after the LG press conference. Samsung is a company that might be the best example of having lots of really, really interesting pokers in the fire, right? Like the smart home has developed in some interesting ways. The robot stuff is very cool. What Samsung really seems to lack is some sort of unifying fabric that weaves all these things together, right? Like we're starting to see bits and pieces of it. You're able to sort of get notifications on your phone from your JetBot when it sees a person or a dog kind of doing its thing. You can use said phone to send cooking instructions from your fridge to your oven, so the oven can start preparing itself to cook your food, I guess. Samsung is on the way there, but like for so many reasons, and I very strongly believe this is at least partially due to. Oh, okay. I do believe this is at least partially. Sorry, my screen went off, and I'm like, is this still going? But yeah, at least partially due to Samsung's corporate structure, like there doesn't seem to be like an overarching vision that's being put into effect. We're getting a lot of interesting initiatives that sort of kind of work together, but I'd love to see more unification as a whole.
And I mean, again, CES being the type of TV focus, home appliance focus show that it is, Samsung tends to focus on these devices. Let's not forget, in just a few days, we will be seeing Samsung again with Galaxy Unpacked on January 14th, where we expect to see things like the latest flagship phones and what else might be, cooking over at Samsung. So we will be also covering that event, but I think that's where the company will be, showing off its devices meant for a larger audience than today, but still not necessarily, the every person perhaps who's looking for, a cheaper phone. Maybe this is very likely to be for their flagship S series. I think it's all but known that it will probably be the S21. And we don't know the starting price or whatever just yet, but based on previous trends, those have been going and getting more and more expensive. It'll be nice again to see if Samsung tries to focus on, it's sort of a balance, right? Interesting new features, advanced features, or keeping prices low. This has kind of been the debate for the last year, I feel like.
Really great point. I just want to give people a quick note. We're transitioning off the section into an interview between Devendra Hardawar, senior editor, and some Samsung execs to talk through their latest TVs. Monitoring the chat really quickly, there are a few things to point out. Kashyap Koparam very astutely notes that Samsung throws 500 things on the wall and sees what sticks. That's now, future, past, and all parallel universes too. You nailed it, man. Like that is exactly Samsung's MO. It comes up with a bajillion different things, and if 3 of them work, that's more or less fine by them.
Success. Sure.
Yeah, exactly. I also, this is very selfish, but Brioska says, had nice things to say about my glasses, which is very interesting because Sherlyn, you do not like these things at all.
I prefer other types of frames, and I'm as long as you like them and you're happy, I am happy for you, bro.
They're fine. Well, I might reconsider, but that's not because of you. It's because of the chat. Speaking of,
well, there you go.
We've got people who want to hear about their robots, not TVs, which is great because I would always prefer to talk about Samsung's robots or any robots instead of TVs because TVs are fine. We don't need to dwell on them too much, I think.
I also want to quickly shout out a lot of people in the chat earlier today, before I think Samsung even, were asking where are the computers, where are the laptops, where are the PCs, and where are the chips. Those are all coming later in the day for sure, and later during the show. They're coming, but Samsung did announce a new laptop. Let me just quickly explain the Galaxy Chromebook 2, by the way, which is a cheaper version of the original Galaxy Chromebook, which, if you recall, was announced last CES with a 4K OLED display and $999 starting price. And during our review, we found out it had all together about 4 hours of battery life, which is teeny tiny and nothing. So this year. Yes, exactly. This year's Galaxy Chromebook 2 will be using a QLED screen instead. It's at full HD resolution and it's got potentially up to 14 hours of battery life. And it starts at a much more reasonable $550, which is still on the pricier side for a Chromebook, but at least not $1,000. So if you want more of the details on the Chromebook 2 and laptops, go to Engadget.com. We have all the details for you there. But V, what were you saying before I talked about the Chromebook?
Oh man, I'm just hanging out with the dudes in chat. Suki Singh says Sony Xperia 1 Mark II, best phone for your buck if you're a photographer. Look, man, I love that phone. It's a phenomenal thing. I took some of the best photos I've ever taken basically in my life on that phone. Well spotted.
Oh.
Some people, Hassan El Agadi asked, 1080p micro LED or 8K LED TV. Got to go with 1080 micro LED because I don't need 8K. Come on, like I barely
8K
care
is a
about TV
lot.
as it is.
And when you say LED too, are you talking about OLED, mini LED, or there's a little. I think you're talking OLED, and yes, OLED is nice, but micro LEDs are getting us there, but we don't really need that high resolution just yet. We'll see, but we have more of that TV chat coming up with Devendra Hardawar very shortly. V, did you have any last thoughts from the chat?
Yeah, no, that's it. I'm enjoying sort of seeing everyone sort of come together and just sort of have a good time in the chat. As Sherlyn noted, we have Devendra Hardawar coming up in conversation with Samsung executives to walk through some of the company's biggest announcements as far as TVs go, which we haven't really talked about so far because I don't think either Sherlyn and I are huge TV people. We have TVs, they work, we don't stress about them too much. That said, we do really, really want to thank you guys for joining us. This is just the first morning in the first few hours of CES 2021 day one. And I think everything is going pretty well so far. I'm certainly having a good time. What about you, Sherlyn?
Me too. And I want to thank people in the chat. Please keep your questions coming. We will be looking at them as much as we can. If you want a direct line, hit us up on social media. I'm at Sherlyn Lowe on Twitter. Chris, you are?
I'm at Chris Velasco. I believe we'll be transitioning off into that sort of roundtable conversation between Devendra and Samsung very shortly. In the meantime, we're taking a look at the chat for some last questions. We'll let you know when we have to switch, but no, we're going right now. Here's Devendra Hardawar and Samsung to talk about all of those new TVs.